I found my daughter bald on the morning of her prom. Then, her younger sister's shocking confession uncovered a dark secret that threatened to shatter our family completely. I had always assumed the most significant drama in our household would revolve around missed curfews or arguments over dresses. I never could have imagined something so devastating. On what was supposed to be a joyous morning, my daughter's piercing screams jolted me from my sleep. I bolted into her room and froze in the doorway. Her beautiful blonde hair was scattered like golden straw across her pillow, and her scalp was completely bare. Standing near the bed, dressed in whimsical unicorn pajamas, was her little sister, an electric razor resting on the nightstand beside her. A quiet confession was already forming on her lips, one that would unravel every single thing we believed we knew about our family. I awoke to the terrifying screams of my teenage daughter, Layla. I scrambled into her bedroom, and my mind struggled to process the scene before me. She was entirely bald, her long, golden hair strewn across her pillowcase in a tragic mess. She was sobbing hysterically, managing to gasp that her younger sister, Mia, must have shaved her head while she was asleep. She stumbled toward her bathroom mirror and let out an even louder, more anguished shriek when she saw her own reflection. Her prom was only 7 hours away, and she had been the undeniable favorite for prom queen. Now, everything was utterly ruined. "Where is Mia?" I demanded, my voice tight with a mixture of anger and disbelief. My husband found her sitting calmly on her own bed, still in her unicorn pajamas, with his electric razor placed neatly on her nightstand. "Mia, what did you do?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice from escalating into a full-blown yell as Layla's wails echoed from the bathroom. "I had to stop her from going to the prom," Mia stated, using that quiet, resolute voice she always adopts when she knows she's in trouble, but is convinced she did the right thing. This was my baby, the same child who would still crawl into Layla's bed during thunderstorms for comfort. This was the same little girl Layla had patiently taught to ride a bike just last summer. The one who constantly shadowed her older sister, peppering her with an endless stream of questions about absolutely everything. I couldn't wrap my head around the idea that she would intentionally destroy her sister's most anticipated night in such a cruel way. Before I could formulate a response, the doorbell chimed. Dylan, Layla's boyfriend, let himself in as he typically did on Saturday mornings. He bounded up the stairs, cheerfully calling out about corsage colors, and then stopped dead in his tracks when he saw Layla's bald head. "What the hell happened to your hair?" he asked, his face a mask of shock and alarm. "Baby, don't cry. We can fix this. Maybe we can get you a beautiful wig. You'll still be the prettiest girl there, I promise." Layla just started crying harder, her sobs racking her body. Dylan pulled her into a tight hug, his eyes meeting mine over her shoulder with an accusatory glare, as if this was somehow my fault. "Did Mia do this? I always said that kid was strange. This is assault, Mrs. Adams." Mia appeared in the bathroom doorway, a small, determined figure in her unicorn pajamas. "I cut off all her hair so she couldn't go to prom with you because you're mean to her." "Mia," I warned, but she continued, her voice unwavering with the certainty of a child on a mission. "You hurt my sister all the time. I see the purple marks on her arms from where you grab her too hard." The bathroom fell into a dead, suffocating silence. Dylan let out a laugh, but it sounded forced and hollow. "Kids make up the craziest stories, Mrs. Adams. Tell her, Layla. Tell your mom how good I am to you." Layla wouldn't look at anyone, her gaze fixed on the tiled floor. I could feel an icy dread spreading through my chest. I took pictures on Mommy's phone when Layla was sleeping, Mia continued, her voice rising slightly. You push her into walls and you hit her on her tummy where nobody can see, and then you buy her presents so she won't tell. With hands that trembled uncontrollably, I pulled out my phone and navigated to the photo gallery. And there they were, a series of close-up images showing finger-shaped bruises marring Layla's arms. Dark, ugly purple marks on her ribs. I felt my stomach plummet. "Oh my God," I whispered, the words barely audible. "Layla, is this true?" Dylan's face flushed a deep red. "Those could be from anything. She plays sports. This is insane. I've spent hundreds of dollars on her. I'm taking her to prom in a limousine." My husband appeared in the doorway, his entire body tensing as he looked over my shoulder at the damning photographs on my phone. "Layla, baby, why didn't you tell us?" I asked, my voice cracking completely under the weight of it all. Dylan's grip on Layla tightened perceptibly. "We're leaving right now. This is completely ridiculous. Get dressed, Layla." "She can't go anywhere if she's too embarrassed about her hair," Mia stated simply. "That's why I shaved it all off while she was sleeping, so she'd have to stay home where she's safe." Dylan tried a different tactic, his voice shifting to a falsely sweet and placating tone. "Mia, sometimes Layla and I just play a little rough when we're having fun. It's not abuse, it's just passion. You're too young to understand boyfriend-girlfriend stuff." My husband moved fully into the bathroom. "Let go of my daughter right now." "But then you did this," Mia added, and everyone's attention snapped back to her. She held up her small, pink tape recorder, the one she used to create her pretend radio shows, and pressed the play button. Dylan's voice, small yet crystal clear, crackled through the tiny speaker. She said the recording was from yesterday, while he was waiting in our living room for Layla to get ready. "Yeah, tomorrow night after prom," his voice sneered from the recorder. "I'm gonna get her absolutely wasted at Jake's after party, so she can't say no this time. My brother already gave me the stuff for her drink. It's time to lock that down before college. Nothing keeps a girl around like getting her pregnant." I felt a wave of nausea so intense I thought I might throw up right there on the bathroom tiles. Layla made a choked, wounded sound like an injured animal. She tried to pull away from Dylan, but he held on even tighter. "That's not real," Dylan stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "You're all crazy. That's not even my voice." "You were going to put something in my daughter's drink," I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. My entire body was vibrating with a rage I had never experienced before. "You were going to assault my baby." Dylan finally let go of Layla. He started backing toward the door, but my husband moved faster, blocking the only exit with his large frame. I could see the muscles in his jaw clenching and unclenching as he stared down the boy who had been hurting our daughter for who knows how long. "You don't want to do this," Dylan said, trying to sound tough, but his voice cracked like a scared child's. "My father is a lawyer. You touch me, and I will ruin your entire family." My husband took another deliberate step forward. Dylan flattened himself against the wall, his eyes darting around for another way out. But then, Dylan's panic suddenly vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating look. He looked my husband straight in the eye and said in the most chilling voice I've ever heard, "I really don't think you want to do that, Mr. Adams, and I think you know exactly why." My husband's face went slack. The color drained from his skin, and his hands began to shake as he stood frozen, while Dylan watched him with a smug, triumphant expression. My husband's entire body went rigid, and something icy and terrifying settled in my gut. Dylan knew something, and whatever it was, it had just paralyzed my husband with fear. With all of us crammed into the small space, the bathroom felt like it was closing in, and I could hear Layla's ragged, panicked breathing behind me. My husband took a step back, and Dylan's smirk widened into a grin. I moved to stand between them, pulling out my phone with trembling fingers. I hit the record button and held it up, making sure Dylan could see the glowing red light. My voice was steadier than I felt when I ordered him to leave our house immediately, or I would call 911. Dylan just laughed, sneering that his father would destroy us for this. He claimed we had no idea who we were messing with. Then he shoved my husband hard enough to make him stumble back into the wall. I kept the phone recording as Dylan stomped down the stairs, knocking our framed family photos off the wall as he went. My husband followed him down, and I stayed with our daughters, who were now both crying. I could hear Dylan downstairs, ranting about lawyers and lawsuits. The front door slammed with such violence that the entire house seemed to shake, and moments later, his car engine roared to life outside. His tires screeched as he peeled out of our driveway, far too fast for our quiet residential street. My husband came back upstairs, his face still as white as a sheet. He looked at the three of us huddled in the bathroom and suggested we all go to the master bedroom to talk. We filed down the hallway to my bedroom, and my husband locked the door behind us. Layla sat on the edge of the bed, still in her pajamas, her bald head reflecting the morning sun streaming through the window. Mia climbed up next to her sister and took her hand. I stood there, staring at my husband, demanding to know what leverage Dylan had on him. My husband sat down heavily on the bed, burying his head in his hands. After a long, agonizing silence, he looked up and told us that he had noticed the bruising on Layla's wrist at dinner 2 weeks prior. He confessed that he had gone to the school the next day to confront Dylan about it. He found Dylan in the parking lot after baseball practice and grabbed him by his shirt. He admitted that he had slammed Dylan against his car and threatened to kill him if he ever laid a hand on Layla again. Dylan had recorded the entire incident on his phone, including the threat. My husband's voice was thick with shame as he recounted how Dylan had played the video for him right there in the parking lot. He said Dylan had threatened that if he ever interfered again, he would take the video to the police and have him charged with assault. The rage in my chest swelled, mixing with my fear until I felt like I was going to explode. I told my husband that we had to call the police right now, about the abuse, the planned drugging, about everything. My husband nodded but voiced his fear about Dylan's video being used against him. He confirmed that Dylan's father was indeed a lawyer, and a notoriously nasty one. Layla sobbed even louder, saying she didn't want her dad to get in trouble because of her. She kept repeating that it was all her fault for dating Dylan in the first place. Mia snuggled into her sister's lap and wrapped her small arms around Layla's neck. She assured Layla in a solemn little voice that none of this was her fault. She continued, "Bad people do bad things. That's on them, not on the people they hurt." As my shattered family huddled on the bed, I picked up my phone and dialed the non-emergency police line. When the dispatcher answered, I stated calmly that we needed to report domestic violence and a planned assault. My voice cracked as I told her about the bruises and the recording of Dylan plotting to drug my daughter. She said she would dispatch an officer to take our statements and asked if we were safe at the moment. I told her yes, but that the boy had just left after making threats. She instructed us to stay inside with the doors locked until the police arrived. While we waited, I asked Layla for her phone to look at her messages from Dylan. She unlocked it with trembling fingers and handed it over. The texts were all there, a horrifying archive stretching back for months. Messages where he dictated what she could wear and who she was allowed to talk to. There is something profoundly unsettling about Mia having all this evidence prepared. The photos on my phone, the tape recorder with Dylan's voice. I'm struck by why an 8-year-old would covertly gather evidence like a child detective instead of simply telling her parents what she witnessed happening to her sibling. There were apologies after he hurt her, always followed by him blaming her for making him angry. Threats about what would happen if she ever tried to leave him. One message made my stomach clench into a tight knot. He had written that he would make sure everyone at school knew she was worthless if she broke up with him. Another one stated that he owned her and she had better remember it. There were hundreds of them, each one making me feel sicker than the last. I started taking screenshots of everything, sending them to my own phone as further evidence. Layla watched me, tears streaming down her face, apologizing over and over again. My husband pulled her into his arms, telling her she had absolutely nothing to be sorry for. He said that we should have seen the red flags and done more to protect her. Mia mentioned that she had tried to tell us for weeks, but we had dismissed her concerns, thinking she was just jealous of the attention Dylan was getting. I picked up my phone again and told Layla I needed to photograph all of her bruises for evidence. She nodded and carefully lifted her shirt, revealing the dark purple blotches on her ribs that made me feel physically ill. I snapped photo after photo, ensuring each one was clear and had the date stamp enabled. She turned around to show me more bruises on her back, some yellow and fading, others fresh and dark. My hands shook as I documented each one, while she just stood there in her bra, staring at the floor. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later, and after I let them in, 2 officers came up to the bedroom. I started by playing Mia's recording, the one with Dylan's voice detailing his plan to drug Layla at Jake's party. The younger officer's face hardened as he listened, and he immediately asked for a copy. I went through the controlling text messages on her phone while Layla showed them the injuries, and they took meticulous notes. The officers called for a detective, explaining that because this involved a planned assault on a minor, one would arrive within the hour. We all waited downstairs while they made calls and filled out paperwork. Detective Sarah Bennett arrived about 45 minutes later, dressed in jeans and a blazer, looking as though she'd been called in on her day off. She introduced herself, explaining that she specialized in cases like this, and asked to speak with each of us separately. She started with Layla, taking her back up to her bedroom while the rest of us waited anxiously in the living room. I could hear the murmur of their voices but couldn't make out the words. They talked for nearly an hour. When it was my turn, I brought everything upstairs, my phone with the pictures, Mia's tape recorder, and the screenshots of Dylan's texts. Detective Bennett examined each piece of evidence carefully, reassuring me that we had done exactly the right thing by documenting everything and calling immediately. She asked about Dylan's family, and I told her his father was a prominent lawyer named Richard Cole, who had a large practice downtown. She wrote that down and asked if Dylan had made any threats to us before today. I told her about his parting words, warning us that his father would ruin our family if we pursued this. She then spoke with my husband, who confessed to the incident at school 2 weeks earlier, where he had grabbed Dylan's shirt. He explained that he had seen fresh bruises on Layla's wrist and lost his temper, threatening Dylan to stay away from her. Detective Bennett was understanding, acknowledging a father's protective instinct and saying that while it wasn't ideal, she would include the full context in her report. When she interviewed Mia, our little girl sat up straight and explained in a very serious tone why she had shaved Layla's head. She said she knew it was a bad thing to do, but she had to protect her sister from the bad man who was going to hurt her even more at prom. The detective smiled gently and told Mia she was very brave for protecting her sister, even if her method of cutting hair wasn't the best choice. Before leaving, Detective Bennett strongly recommended we take Layla to the emergency room immediately to have her injuries professionally documented by medical staff. She gave me her card and said she would be in touch about the next steps, which would include an interview with Dylan and his family. We drove to the hospital in a heavy silence, broken only by Mia asking if she was going to go to jail for cutting Layla's hair. When I explained at the ER desk that we were there for documentation of domestic violence, they took us back to a private room right away. The doctor was a kind woman who spoke gently to Layla as she examined each bruise, measuring it with a ruler while a nurse took photographs. Layla gripped my hand tightly when they asked about the injuries to her stomach, and she had to explain how Dylan would punch her there so no one could see the marks. They conducted a full examination and documented 17 separate injuries in various stages of healing. The nurse gave us copies of everything for our records and for the police. While we were waiting for the discharge paperwork, a social worker came in with a folder of information on domestic violence resources. She explained that the hospital was legally required to report this to the authorities, which we had already done, and offered us referrals for therapy and support groups. She spoke with Layla about safety planning and what to do if Dylan tried to contact her. We were in the process of signing the discharge papers when my husband's phone rang. Richard Frank's name flashed on the screen. My husband answered and put it on speaker without a word. Richard's voice boomed through the phone, loud and aggressive, threatening to sue us for everything we had for assault and defamation if we continued with these false allegations about his son. The social worker's eyes widened, and she discreetly took out her own phone, recording Richard's tirade about how we would regret messing with his family. My husband finally cut in to say we were at the hospital documenting Dylan's abuse, and then hung up. The social worker said she would add her recording to the file as evidence of witness intimidation. We left the hospital around noon and drove home in complete silence, with Mia asking if Dylan was going to be arrested. My husband kept checking the rearview mirror as if he expected to be followed. As we turned onto our street, I saw it immediately. Dylan's black car was parked across the street from our house, the engine running. My hand shook as I fumbled for my phone and dialed Detective Bennett's number from her card. She answered on the second ring and told us to drive past our house and park somewhere safe while she dispatched a patrol car. We pulled into the grocery store parking lot 2 blocks away and waited, my heart pounding. 10 minutes later, she called back to say officers were at our house and it was safe to return. When we arrived, 2 police cruisers had Dylan's car boxed in. Dylan was sitting behind the wheel with his arms crossed, looking annoyed as an officer spoke to him through his window. The officer came over and told us Dylan claimed he was just driving by, but they had issued him a formal warning not to come near our property or any member of our family. They took photos of his car and logged the incident as a violation in the case file. When they let him go, Dylan tore out of there, and the officers stayed until we were all safely inside. That evening, as I was trying to cook dinner, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was Karen Hughes from the school counseling office. She said she had heard about what happened from another staff member and wanted to offer her support. She offered to arrange for Layla's homework to be sent home, so she wouldn't fall behind while she was dealing with everything. I thanked her, telling her it would be a huge help, as Layla wasn't ready to face everyone at school yet. An hour later, Detective Bennett called with an update. She had tracked down Jake and questioned him about the plans for the after-prom party. Jake had become extremely nervous and admitted that Dylan had told him to make sure Layla's drinks were extra strong that night. Dylan had also mentioned getting something special from his brother to put in them. The detective said Jake seemed scared and was now cooperating fully, realizing the seriousness of the situation. She also told me she'd run a check on Dylan's older brother, Mason Cole, and found he had 3 prior drug-related offenses, including selling to students at the local community college. She was now working with a judge to get a warrant to search Dylan's phone and car for more evidence. The next morning, a woman from Child Protective Services called, explaining they needed to conduct a home visit due to a report of children being exposed to domestic violence. My stomach sank, even though I knew we had done nothing wrong. She scheduled the visit for the following day, explaining it was standard procedure to ensure the children's environment was safe. That night was awful. Every car that drove past our house made us jump. My husband got up 3 times to double-check the locks on all the doors and windows. Around midnight, I heard soft crying coming from Layla's room and found both my girls in her bed. Mia had climbed in with her big sister, and they were holding each other tightly. Layla's face was wet with tears, and Mia was stroking her back, just as Layla used to do for her during thunderstorms. I sat on the edge of the bed and smoothed their hair until they both finally drifted off to sleep. The CPS worker arrived at 9 a.m. the next day, clipboard in hand, with a serious expression. She interviewed each of the girls alone in their rooms, while my husband and I waited in the kitchen. She spent nearly an hour with Layla, asking about our home life and if she felt safe here. Then she talked to Mia, who apparently told her everything about why she cut Layla's hair and showed her the pictures she had taken. When she was finished, the worker came out smiling and told us we had done an excellent job handling the situation. She said she had no concerns about our parenting and was impressed by how protective the girls were of each other. She left us with some pamphlets on trauma in children and closed the case. That afternoon, I got a call from a woman named Rachel Morgan, who introduced herself as a victim advocate assigned to our case. She explained that we could file for an emergency protective order to legally keep Dylan away from us. She walked me through all the paperwork over the phone, promising to help us assemble everything with our evidence. Mia's decision to take pictures before the haircut shows some serious foresight for someone her age. This child is thinking 3 steps ahead, like she's playing chess while everyone else is still learning checkers. We spent 2 hours going over all the photos, the recordings, and the documentation from the hospital. She said our case was incredibly strong and that a judge would almost certainly grant it immediately. The next day, a certified letter arrived from Richard Frank's law firm. My husband opened it, and his face turned a deep shade of red as he read. It was a 3-page document filled with legal threats, accusing us of assaulting his son and making false allegations that were damaging his reputation. It threatened to sue us for everything we owned if we didn't drop the charges immediately. It also specifically mentioned the incident at school where my husband grabbed Dylan's shirt, claiming it was assault on a minor. My husband's hands were shaking as he took photos of each page and forwarded them to Detective Bennett. She called back within minutes, telling us this was clear evidence of witness intimidation and to document any further threats. Monday morning came far too quickly, and Layla had to go back to school, wearing a beanie to cover her bald head. I drove her, as she was too afraid to take the bus with everyone staring. When we got there, the parking lot was already buzzing, and I could see kids pointing at our car. Layla squeezed my hand so hard it hurt as we walked through the main doors together. The whispering started instantly. I overheard one girl say something about Layla making it all up for attention. Another group of kids walked past us, and one of the boys muttered that he thought Layla and Dylan were both jerks anyway. The principal was waiting for us in the main office, along with the woman I recognized as Karen Hughes from the counseling office. Karen led us into her office and gave us a new class schedule for Layla, with alternate routes mapped out through the building. She explained that security would be watching for Dylan and that they had already moved Layla's locker to a different hallway. Karen personally walked us through the new route to each of her classes and showed Layla a safe space she could go if she ever felt anxious. As we were walking, my phone rang. It was Detective Bennett, and she said she had news about the search warrant. She and other officers had searched Dylan's car that morning and found a small plastic baggie hidden under the driver's seat. The pills inside looked like Rohypnol. They were rushing them to the lab for testing, but she was confident about what they would find. 2 hours later, Dylan was led out of his house in handcuffs while neighbors watched from their driveways. Detective Bennett called back to inform us he had been arrested and charged with possession of a controlled substance and conspiracy to commit sexual assault. His father had him bilaid out before dinner, but at least now there was an official case number, and real charges had been filed. 3 days later, we were in a courtroom for the emergency protective order hearing, with Rachel Morgan by our side. I had to get up and tell the judge everything that had happened, detailing the abuse while Layla sat shaking in her chair. The judge listened to Mia's recording of Dylan plotting to drug Layla, his expression growing grimmer with every word. He questioned my husband about grabbing Dylan's shirt at school, and he admitted to everything, explaining he was trying to protect his daughter. The judge acknowledged a father's reaction and kept the focus on Dylan's months-long pattern of abuse. Dylan's lawyer tried to argue this was just teenage drama blown out of proportion, but the judge wasn't having it. He granted the temporary restraining order immediately, with strict conditions, including that Dylan could not come within 500 feet of Layla. The following week, the school held its own disciplinary hearing about Dylan's conduct on campus. The principal reviewed all the evidence, including the drug possession charges and Dylan's history of aggressive behavior in the hallways. They suspended him immediately, pending the outcome of the criminal investigation, and banned him from all school property, including graduation. Dylan's father showed up and screamed about lawsuits, but the school board didn't back down. Layla started seeing a therapist who specialized in helping teens who had been in abusive relationships. For the first few sessions, she just sat there and cried, unable to talk about what had happened. But the therapist was patient, and slowly, Layla started to open up about how Dylan had made her feel worthless. She talked about being scared all the time, never knowing what would set him off or make him grab her. The therapist helped her see that none of it was her fault, that abusers are masters at making their victims believe they deserve the pain. Our whole family started going to therapy once a week to learn how to support each other. The therapist explained that Mia saw her sister was in danger and took the only action she could think of to keep her safe. It wasn't the right way to handle it, but it came from a place of love and terror in a child's mind. Mia told the therapist she had been watching Dylan hurt Layla for months and felt small and powerless to stop it. She said cutting Layla's hair was the only way she could think of to guarantee her sister would be home and safe that night. The therapist helped us all understand that a family living with abuse has to find new ways to communicate. We practiced having hard conversations about our feelings without blaming or shaming each other. Layla and Mia started doing activities together where they could talk about their fears in a safe space with rules for listening. I learned that I needed to be more present, to look for the signs I had missed, and to create a space where my kids felt they could tell me anything. My husband had to work through his guilt for not seeing the abuse sooner and his anger over the shirt-grabbing incident. The therapist said that trauma impacts the whole family unit, and we all needed time to heal from what Dylan had done to us. She gave us homework between sessions, like writing in journals and having family check-ins every night at dinner. It was difficult work, but I could see my daughters starting to trust again, to feel safe in their own home. 3 weeks later, Detective Bennett called while I was making dinner, asking if she could stop by with an update on the case. She arrived within the hour and sat at our kitchen table, her notebook open. She told us that after hearing what happened to Layla, 2 other girls from Dylan's school had come forward. Neither girl wanted to press charges, but both described the same pattern of behavior: grabbing too hard, pushing them into walls, and then showering them with expensive gifts to keep them quiet. The detective said their statements would help show the prosecutor that Dylan had done this before and was likely to do it again if he didn't face serious consequences this time. The next morning, we got a call from the district attorney's office. They were officially charging Dylan with multiple felonies, including assault, conspiracy to commit sexual assault, and possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. Richard Cole had already hired a team of 3 lawyers from the most expensive firm in the state, but the prosecutor said our evidence was solid, and they felt confident they could get a conviction. Layla was sitting next to me during the call, and when she heard the prosecutor mention she might have to testify, her whole body tensed up. After we hung up, she was quiet for a long time before saying she wanted to do it. She said other girls needed to know it was okay to speak up, and she wasn't going to let Dylan silence her anymore. My husband had been dealing with his own legal fallout from grabbing Dylan's shirt at school. He met with a lawyer who reviewed all the evidence and said that given Dylan's admitted plan to drug and assault Layla, No reasonable prosecutor would ever press charges against a father protecting his child. The lawyer sent a letter to Richard Cole, stating that any further threats or attempts at legal action would be considered harassment, and that we would file our own charges if he didn't stop immediately. Meanwhile, Mia started seeing a child therapist twice a week to process everything she'd been through, including the guilt she felt for shaving Layla's head, even though she was trying to protect her sister. The therapist said Mia had been carrying the weight of knowing about the abuse for months and felt helpless to stop it, which is why she took such a drastic step when she found out about Dylan's plans for prom night. After a few sessions, the therapist suggested we look into a restorative justice program where Mia could make amends for the head shaving in a healthy way that would help her process her feelings. Mia wrote Layla a 3-page letter, apologizing for cutting her hair, but also explaining how scared she had been and how she didn't know what else to do to keep her safe that night. She also started volunteering at the local domestic abuse shelter, sorting donations and making care packages for the kids who had to leave their homes in a hurry. 2 months into the court process, Dylan violated the protective order. His friends started showing up at Layla's school, passing on messages from him saying he wanted to work things out, that he missed her. The first time it happened, Layla came home shaking and showed me the note one of Dylan's basketball teammates had shoved in her locker. We documented it and reported it to Detective Bennett, who added it to the case file and issued a formal warning to Dylan that any further violations would result in his immediate arrest. But it kept happening. Different friends would leave notes in her textbooks or approach her in the hallway, saying she should give Dylan another chance. Each time, we photographed the evidence and filed a report, creating a paper trail that showed Dylan's inability to respect boundaries, even with a court order in place. During this time, Layla started going to a support group at the hospital for teens who had been hurt by a boyfriend or girlfriend. It's almost uncanny how Detective Bennett consistently finds exactly what's needed at the perfect moment. The pills under the car seat, the 2 other girls coming forward. Everything falls into place so neatly that it makes you wonder about the timing of it all. For the first few meetings, she just sat in the circle and listened to other kids tell their stories, but eventually she started to share her own. She met a girl there whose ex-boyfriend had broken her elbow and another whose girlfriend used to lock her in closets when she got mad. They all understood what it was like to love someone who hurt you, to feel like you couldn't tell anyone because they wouldn't get it, or they'd think you were being dramatic. 6 months after Mia shaved Layla's head, the criminal trial began in the downtown courthouse. Dylan's legal team tried to paint him as a good kid from a good family who made a few relationship mistakes, but didn't deserve to have his future ruined. The prosecutor laid out all the evidence: the photos of Layla's bruises, Mia's recording of Dylan planning to drug her, the drugs found in his car, and the testimony from the other girls he had dated. When it was Layla's turn to testify, she walked to the witness stand wearing her prom dress, her head held high, even though her hands were shaking. She described Dylan grabbing her arms so hard he left marks, pushing her into walls, and hitting her stomach where no one could see the bruises. She talked about being scared all the time, never knowing what would set him off, and how he would buy her jewelry or flowers afterward, telling her he just loved her too much to control himself sometimes. The prosecutor had Layla step down and then called Mia to the stand. My little girl walked up there in her prettiest dress, a pink one with unicorns on it, and the bailiff had to lower the microphone for her. She raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth in that serious little voice kids use when they know something is incredibly important. The prosecutor pressed play on Mia's tape recorder, and the entire courtroom fell silent as Dylan's voice filled the room, talking about getting Layla drunk and putting something in her drink at Jake's party. I watched the jurors' faces change as they heard him laugh about how he would make sure she couldn't say no this time, about how getting her pregnant would lock her down before college. One older woman on the jury put her hand over her mouth, and another man shook his head in disgust. Dylan's lawyer jumped up, objecting that the recording was illegal because Dylan didn't know he was being recorded, but the judge cut him off. She ruled that Mia made the recording in her own home, where Dylan had no reasonable expectation of privacy, and that the evidence would stand. Dylan's face turned beet red, and he started whispering furiously to his lawyer, who just kept shaking his head. The prosecutor asked Mia why she recorded Dylan, and she said in a small voice that she had seen the bruises on Layla and she wanted proof, because sometimes grown-ups don't believe kids. 2 days later, my husband took the stand, and I could see his hands were trembling as he sat down. He told the court about seeing the bruises on Layla and confronting Dylan at school, admitting he had grabbed Dylan's shirt, but explaining that he was a father trying to protect his daughter. The prosecutor showed how Dylan had then used that incident to threaten and control our family, presenting it as just one more example of his manipulative behavior. Dylan's lawyer tried to paint my husband as the aggressor, but after everything they had heard, the jury wasn't buying it. On the 3rd day of testimony, after hearing from the detective about the drugs found in Dylan's car and from the 2 other girls he had dated, the jury went into deliberations. We waited in the hallway for 4 agonizing hours, drinking terrible coffee from a vending machine and jumping every time the courtroom door opened. When they finally called us back in, the foreman stood up and read the verdict. Guilty on all major charges, including assault, conspiracy to commit sexual assault, and possession of a controlled substance. Dylan's face went white, and his mother started to sob, while his father, Richard, just sat there, his jaw clenched tight. 3 weeks later, at the sentencing hearing, the judge gave Dylan 2 years in a juvenile detention facility, followed by 3 years of probation, mandatory therapy, and a permanent restraining order keeping him away from Layla. In the parking lot afterward, Richard Cole confronted us, his face red with fury, threatening appeals and lawsuits, yelling that we had ruined his son's future over some teenage love drama. My husband stepped up to him and said in a cold, level voice that his son was a predator who finally got caught, and that maybe if Richard had been a better father, none of this would have happened. Richard looked like he wanted to swing at my husband, but there were court officers everywhere, so he just got in his Mercedes and sped off. Almost immediately after Dylan was locked away, something in Layla shifted. She started sleeping through the night again. She no longer flinched when a door slammed. She decided she wanted to help other girls learn the warning signs of abuse and started working with the school counselor to organize assemblies where she could share her story. The first time she spoke in front of the entire junior class, her voice shook, but she pushed through, talking about how Dylan had isolated her from her friends and made her believe the abuse was her fault. After her speech, 3 different girls came up to her privately to ask for help with their own situations. In the wake of our case, the school board held a special meeting and brought in experts on teen dating violence to provide training for all the teachers and staff. They implemented new protocols for reporting suspected abuse and started teaching healthy relationship workshops in health classes. The principal told us that until Layla's case, they had no idea how widespread the problem really was. Meanwhile, Layla's hair started to grow back in soft, fuzzy patches that she would run her hand over constantly. She tried different hats and scarves for a while, but eventually, she decided she liked the super short look and kept it buzzed. She told me her short hair was a reminder that Mia loved her enough to do something that drastic to save her, and that she was strong enough to survive anything. Mia channeled all her protective energy into positive action. She started volunteering with us at domestic abuse awareness events, helping to assemble care packages for women's shelters. She would decorate each package with her drawings and add little notes that said things like, "You are brave and you deserve to be safe." The shelter director told us that Mia's packages always made the women smile, even on their hardest days. My husband started leaving work early on Thursdays to be home when the girls got home from school, something he'd never done in our 15 years of marriage. We would sit at the kitchen table with cookies and milk while they did their homework, asking about their day, and actually listening to the answers instead of just going through the motions. We started having family meetings every Sunday night, where anyone could bring up anything they wanted to talk about, with no judgment. Layla started to open up about small things first, like being worried about a test or annoyed with a friend, before moving on to the bigger things, like learning to trust her own judgment again. Mia would show us her drawings from art therapy and explain what the colors meant about her feelings that week. 6 months flew by, a blur of therapy appointments and court dates, but slowly, we started to piece our normal life back together. Our family dinners were loud again, filled with real laughter instead of the strained silence that had hung over us when Dylan was in the picture. Layla joined the debate team and started winning tournaments, finding her voice in more ways than one. Mia taught herself how to knit and made scarves for everyone at the women's shelter for Christmas. Layla found a safe space in the support group at the hospital, where she met other survivors who understood what she'd been through. There was a boy there named Adam, whose ex-girlfriend had been stalking him for months. He and Layla started talking after meetings, comparing notes on boundaries and red flags. He never pushed for anything more than friendship at first, just listening when she needed to talk and making her laugh with bad jokes about their shared therapy homework. When he finally asked her to a movie 3 months after they met, he gave her 3 different exit strategies in case she felt uncomfortable, and told her his mom could pick them up early if she wanted. They took things so slowly that their first kiss didn't happen until 2 months into their relationship, and Adam asked for permission before it happened. At her school, Mia was nominated for a citizenship award for starting a whole campaign to teach kids about the warning signs of abuse after what happened to Layla. She made posters with simple messages that even elementary schoolers could understand, and convinced the principal to let her do age-appropriate presentations for all the grade levels. On the day she got the award, she wore her best dress and gave a speech about how protecting the people you love means speaking up, even when you're scared. Detective Bennett would call every few weeks with an update, always asking how the girls were doing before getting into the legal stuff. She told us Dylan had gotten into 3 fights in his first month at the detention center, always picking on smaller kids, just like he had with Layla. He was moved to a higher security facility after breaking another kid's nose, and his release date was pushed back another 6 months for his violent behavior. Dylan picking fights with smaller students in detention just proves the apple doesn't fall far from the entitled tree. I guess those anger management seminars aren't part of the Juvie Prep Academy curriculum yet. His father tried to appeal the conviction twice, but the judge denied both appeals, especially after Dylan's record in detention proved the pattern of aggression was real. Leia's graduation day arrived on a beautiful, sunny afternoon. Her hair had grown into a cute pixie cut that she'd learned to style with little clips. She walked across the stage as salutatorian to a huge cheer from our section, where even the kids from Mia's art therapy group had come to support her. Her speech was about finding strength in unexpected places, and how the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. She thanked Mia by name for saving her life, and I saw my youngest daughter cry happy tears for the first time since this all started. College acceptance letters had been rolling in for weeks, and Layla decided on a school 3 hours away, far enough for independence, but close enough to come home when she needed to. That summer, she took a self-defense class and convinced Adam to take it with her, and they learned healthy ways to protect themselves. We went dorm shopping together, and she picked out bright, cheerful colors, a stark contrast to the dark clothes she wore during the Dylan months. On her desk, she set up a picture of our family, one of her and Mia taken after the trial, both of them laughing at something on Mia's phone. The night before she left for college, Layla crept into Mia's bed, just like they used to when they were little. The next morning, I found them curled up together, Mia's arm thrown protectively over her big sister, even in her sleep. As we were loading up the car, Layla gave Mia a long hug and whispered something in her ear that made them both laugh and cry at the same time.